I was telling Dwayne, you may know him as Mr. Fish, or sometimes Fish, which is how Dwayne he finds his emails Fish. So I've been calling him Fish to people. So anyway, we have been going back and forth about, not a lot, but about this session, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I don't know if you're gonna make us laugh, Dwayne, but you sure have made me laugh in our little exchanges. And a great sense of humor. And if some of you, I hope many of you know his work. I'm going to give him a little intro here in a minute, but pretty widespread his cartooning. I picked up on you, Fish, on, I guess, maybe the first time I saw your work was with Chris Hedges, the work you do for him. But since then, I've seen you on Instagram and a lot of places. So, okay, so it's 8:03. I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. First of all, I want to let me welcome you to the War Industry Resistors Network. And for those of you who don't know, we've been at this for a little over 3 years now. This is our 43rd webinar. We've had a variety of speakers on, but this is our first cartoonist. So, so I'm really happy about that. Hang on a second, I need to dig up my information here about the intro. Okay. So, so before I start giving the intro about Dwayne, I want you all to know about our next one, which is on August the 13th, and it features a man from Wales. His name is Roy Jones, and he is going to talk about a campaign that they have going on there that is, it's called PARC, P-A-R-C, Pembrokeshire Against the Radar Campaign. And what they're doing is fighting against a deep space advanced radar capability, which is known as DARK. So the campaign is called PARC Against DARK. And he will be actually at 11 a.m. because he's going to be coming to us from Wales. But of course, we'll record it. And if you can't make it on that time on August 13th, you know, we'll send out the recording as we usually do. I'm going to we do have a link that we can put in the chat for that one. And I'm going to put that in right now. So if you want to register for that, I'll send, it'll be in the mailing that I send out, and there's the link right there too. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce our friend, Mr. Fish. And his name is Dwayne Booth, but of course he goes the pen name of Mr. Fish. And he's been a freelance writer and a cartoonist for 25 years. He publishes under his real name and also under Mr. Fish. And he's been with many of the nation's most reputable and prestigious magazines, journals, newspapers. I'm going to post, he has a more extensive bio, which I'll post in the chat rather than rattle off all the places he publishes and things he does. But I do want to read this one thing that he sent me as his brief bio, which gives you a sense of Dwayne's sense of humor. He goes, he says, here's the bio you can use. And it says, Mr. Fish lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Occasionally, he laughs his head off. His mother has no idea what he's up to. She cries easily. For more information, date him. So a little great bio there. And Mr. Fish, I'm going to turn it right over to you. Go right ahead.
Sweet. Thank you, Ken. Thanks everybody who is here. I really appreciate your presence, and I will do my best to move us through some slides and through some general theories about what I think I do, and also what I think that artists and cartoonists have been trying to do over the millennia. And then we'll leave it open to for the end for some Q&A and some riveting conversation. So I will share my screen and I will do that. So if there's anything also that thrills or disturbs you during this talk, make a note of it and we'll talk about it afterwards. Because I don't know if I guess that you all saw that the name of this talk is warning graphic content. I will try to keep it not true exactly to that, but it will slightly touch into warning graphic content. I mean, let's make this something of a thrill ride, I guess. Okay, so as you can see, we're going to be talking about political cartoons, comics, and the uncensored artistic mind. I want to focus mostly on the uncensored artistic mind and ask you to ask yourself, even if you are not an artist, how easily you connect to that and how you manifest that kind of uncensored thinking inside your own life. If you feel like you're self-censoring, if you feel like you're being censored from the outside, what are you doing with your free thinking? My guess is that just because you're here and you're curious about what these programs that Ken was talking about that are presented as webinars, I'm guessing you're used to some sort of contrarian thinking and pushback against the establishment when it misbehaves. So I'm assuming you all have some sort of moral center that can sometimes get you in the right kind of trouble. So here, I guess we're like-minded riffraff in that way. Okay, so I wanted to start, of course, now here we go. I want to start with a question. Because when I talk about art, what we're talking about is we're talking about a kind of language. And as a language, what do we utilize language for? We utilize language to engage with the outside world and with each other. So the general question that one would ask is, I am not frozen now. How do we read the world? And there is a basic way to break this down in a very simple way. And I would say this is not moving as easily as I was hoping. Darn. Oh. All right. Hopefully this will become a little more streamlined as we move along. We tend to read the world with our heart and our minds. Okay. So generally speaking, that is how we're going to proceed with this idea that we read the world with our hearts and our mind. So we are going to start with, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just see if I can move easier without making it a full screen and see if that works for everybody. Is that okay?
Sure.
Because I'm going to need some brevity with some of this, obviously. Looks exactly like it did.
It looks fine.
I know, but it's a problem of advancing. So let's just see how far we can get without me stumbling around. So let's start with the mind and how the mind interprets the world. I'm guessing that none of you can read Sanskrit. If you can, pretend that you can't. What you're looking at here is the Sanskrit word for free spirit, open-mindedness. Is it free thinking, open-mindedness? It's not. It's the concept for that. And then we crystallize it in this symbol. And then we think that what we're looking at, perhaps, if we learn this language, that we're actually engaging with free thought and free spirit. When in fact, we're just looking at the concept rendered as a symbol. Now, why that's significant is because this is something that you need to be taught. You need to learn how to read this kind of language. And that's what we're going to get into a little bit, this difference between how the mind interacts with the world and how the heart does. Damn. This was working just a minute ago.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. The mind. Wrong way. All right, so I want to talk about the gullibility of the human mind and how consciousness works. What you're looking at here is diagonal lines that are actually parallel to each other. Now, how the physiology of your brain works, it's not allowing you to see that truth. It is actually true that they are diagonal parallel lines, but as hard as you try, you can't actually see what is demonstrated as an actual truth in front of you. Your mind is confounding you and making it impossible to see. Similarly here, all of these lines that are running from left to right, they are also all parallel with each other stacked down. But the human mind, your consciousness, is literally preventing you from seeing the actual literal truth that is in front of you. Now, these are just obviously these are illusions, right? These are fun little games that people play. But consider that for a second. If you are in possession of a brain, in possession of a consciousness, that even when you're willing yourself to see what is literally in front of you, you're being prevented from actually seeing it. Now, if that is true, then there are numerous ways that that interaction can be manipulated using imagery, but also using distracting words and theories that are going to also prevent you from seeing what is literally true in front of you. And you can just start to guess how that can become problematic and how you can be manipulated to either ignore or just remain blind to what is actually in front of you. So here's another example of that, particularly if we're talking about art. All art is rendered with tools. We can just basically say pencils, brushes, paint, and a canvas. All right, so similar to the illusion that I just showed you about the parallel lines running diagonally and in the landscape pattern, every piece of art that you look at, your brain will see what the intention of the artist is before it considers all of those components that I just showed you. Everything, every time you look at a piece of art, you don't first say that is graphite on paper, that is paint or ink on paper rendered with these different tools. You immediately see what the intention of the artist is, and you respond as if it is real. So, for example, this was drawn with a pencil. Now, when you look at something like this, you're not able to, even knowing that it is just simply graphite on paper, you're still going to be distracted by what my intention was with this drawing. You have no other choice. Of course, I can make it sort of benign and nice, but it is the same thing. You are responding to what the intention of the artist is and what is rendered in this way. Now, if you just consider that as how we also use words, words do the same manipulation. We respond to language as if it is a reflection of real life. And similarly to how art is portrayed, words and concepts can be constructed to create horrible lies, misinformation, all of these things that we then will respond to as if it is real. So that is a conceptual language. It is something that we are taught. It's different from what we're going to be getting into when it comes to the artistic language. Here's another way to consider it and how human consciousness works. What you're looking at here is a penny. We all recognize this as a penny, right? So a penny has physical mass. You can actually touch it, feel it. It has agency in the world as a physical object. It is also a cent. Now, the cent is the imaginary value of the penny. So long as we live in a society that is able to utilize that concept and say this coin is equal to this imaginary value of a cent, it has exchange value. If we existed in a different society, if we came from another planet and somebody utilized this as a value in order to get something from somebody as sort of an exchange value, it just wouldn't function. So you have to be taught that there is a value, an imaginary value that we attach to the physical thing that is a penny. Now, where human consciousness comes in and becomes a further distraction is that that's when we conflate the physical penny to be the same thing as the imaginary cent. And when we do that, we think we're tricked into thinking that we can interact with our ideas as if they are physical things. Now, I'm using a penny here to make that point. I could show you the American flag, for example. That is also just stripes, fabric. It's a pattern that is rendered on a piece of fabric, but it has meaning, different meanings to different people. Some people find it very moving. They can be reduced to tears because of the patriotism that is attached to it. Other people in other parts of the world see the American flag cresting over the horizon, and it's the face of Satan that is coming to do horrible, horrible things. So it's all dependent on what you're willing to, what you or your society is willing to imagine about physical things, and then conflating them to be the same thing. And that can be very, very problematic for numbers of reasons that we could certainly go into. So now let's move on into the heart and how the heart reads the world. So consider this. Now we're moving away from the sort of the lingual understanding of how the world works and the conceptual way we engage with the world. And what you're looking at here is the Grand Canyon at sunset. Now, I'm sure that some of you have actually seen this. You've maybe been in the Grand Canyon at sunset. If you haven't, you've certainly been in a place in nature where a transcendental moment like this has confronted you and wowed you and made you feel centered in a state of joy of being. Um, Now, if you are ever standing with somebody, just imagine one way to ruin this experience is if somebody started to explain to you why the sky is that color, or just started to yammer on and on about what you were looking at. It would completely take you out of the moment and your ability to actually experience the reality that you're taking in because you're using something other than your intellect to commune with the meaning of life. You're using your full physiology. Now, artists have known this for a very long time. They understand that you can be illiterate and you can still read art because it's a universal language. It communicates utilizing the physicality of the real world to communicate with you and your intrinsic understanding of what that means, because we all have this connection to the real world. There are artists such as Mark Rothko, who we're looking at right here. Very similar to what you were just looking at with the Grand Canyon. And what the abstract expressionists and Mark Rothko in particular here is, if you know Mark Rothko's work, you know that these are large canvases. And the idea was that you're supposed to stand in front of this and allow it to be as much in your peripheral vision and your direct vision as possible, just like a sunset would be. And you're supposed to stand in front of it and become exhausted by the fact that your intellect is not going to be able to explain to you what you're looking at. And once the words that you're trying to use to make sense of what you're looking at, because you're trying to be literal with it, you can say that it's paint on canvas, but then where's the joy in that? So as you're trying to create meaning, you start to rely less and less on your intellect to define it for you. And what you're left with is this wow moment. You're reading it sort of with your heart more than your head. And those people who really love abstract art and abstract expressionism understand that. It's the same thing when you're listening to jazz, for example. You're listening to music that doesn't have the distraction of lyrics. I'm not saying that, music that has lyrics is less than, but just to push this point forward, if you're listening to John Coltrane, you're participating in that. You're bringing your life experience into what Coltrane is communicating, and you're having a conversation, a non-lingual conversation about an adventurous, emotional zigzag through something or other. And that is a wow moment, and that is meaningful. And arguably, we can certainly have a discussion about when it comes to moments in your life when you feel grounded in meaning. I would argue that it is the non-lingual moments. There's no definition for what it means to fall in love or to be in love. Poets have been grappling with that for many centuries, and the best poets understand that all you can do is you can create these cues to what it feels like to you, but the significance of it is going to be happening outside of your direct association with words and concepts. Right? I mean, I hope you're all in love and you're saying, yes, amen, Mr. Fish. That is exactly right. So that's an experiential language. Okay, so we were talking about the concept of words being used to decipher the meaning of existence, and what I was just showing you was the experiential version of that. So we've got experiential versus the conceptual. Now, this is what artists have been grappling with back and forth over the centuries, which is trying to find that balance, trying to communicate in a way that is just like, okay, this means something to me because I already know it, right? It's an intrinsic meaning to me. But how can I sort of then manipulate some sort of dialogue around what we're experiencing, the commonality of the human experience, but you do have to utilize words and concepts. So there's that in-between space that it becomes interesting. Here's a way to break it down very simply. Words represent how we communicate with reality, while images represent how reality communicates with us. And that's one of the key components when it comes to using the visual language to communicate your thoughts and feelings to the rest of the world. Here is an example of that. So we're all looking at this word cold. And I assume that we're all English-speaking people and that we can read the English language. So that's why this has meaning. It's not a Sanskrit word that I have to teach you. It is an English word that you already know, right? So in order to decipher this and understand this, you see the word cold. We can sit here for a second. The word cold will enter your intellect, and then whatever you want to attach to it, sense memory of cold, an experience of cold, then you can perhaps allow it to sort of move closer into down into your heart, and then again, you can attach it to these other things, but it starts here. That's how you read it. Now, when you look at something like this, the experience that I hope that you just had is that this hits you instantaneous, it enters here, and then it goes in the opposite direction from the lingual version. This is where you then can move it up into your intellect, and you can ask the question, who painted this? Where is this? And questions like that. But the impact hit here. And understand that the using this visual language predates the invention of the written word by about 40,000 years. And that is also another kind of significance. For a very, very, very long time, the belief in recording what it means to be alive, how we grapple with our spiritual connection to the universe, quite literally, we do that with images. Look at the cave paintings and look at all the crafts that came out of that early time. They're all physical representations and ways to engage with the outside world by trying to reproduce it in some way. Here's another example, but since this is, don't get worried, I wasn't going to do something untoward there. But the fact that maybe some of you were nervous is just another great example of what this is. I can write poop. That is very safe. But in order to show something, right, the truth of a reality, it can make people brace themselves for something that they are not used to seeing. And again, that to me speaks to the power of the written of this visual language and what artists do. They bypass the decorum that is often necessary when it comes to the lingual form of language. So then when you're creating a piece of art and you're creating a form of language, one of the two things that you really have to consider uh, in accordance with how you're going to react to it is what is the context and what is the intent. Now, very often through history, artists have gotten in trouble because the context and the intent was ignored. Uh, Things were taken at face value in a vacuum, and then the misinterpretation and the willful ignorance when it comes to looking at certain forms of communication uh, led to the vilification of the communication and the language that the artist was trying to portray. So just breaking that down for a second, what you have here is on the left, you can see it's a theater and it's the town square. And then on the right, you have the actual town square. So you have a public space, and then you have the theater of the imagination. And when you go into a theater, you know to surrender yourself to what the artist is trying to communicate. And you're going to open your mind to anything that happens on that stage, right? Take what is happening on that stage now and put it into the public sphere, then you have problems. Lenny Bruce, who, if you don't know who Lenny Bruce is, he's the inventor of stand-up commentary from the 1960s, got in trouble quite often because he utilized language that even in nightclubs wasn't people weren't used to hearing it. You were used to hearing it in your private life and among your friends and everything, but put it in a place that was supposed to have some sort of controls, and you get in trouble. Where we are now with social media and so forth is there's been this complete fuzzing of what is appropriate in art and what is appropriate outside of the theater. As we all know, social media and so forth has blurred these lines to the point where many artists are afraid to even do this exploratory research on what it means to be a human being and how we should be talking about that, because they're afraid they're going to get canceled because people on the outside are misinterpreting what they're doing inside of the theater. I'll just give you a very quick example. I don't know how many of you have seen the Book of Mormon, the South Park guys musical. My wife and I were given tickets a few years ago from our neighbors who all of a sudden couldn't go. I hadn't seen it yet. My brother saw it and said it was great. And many people said that it was great. It was a huge, huge hit on Broadway. And so my wife and I went to a matinee performance, and it was 2 p.m. And we were the youngest people in the auditorium by like 20 or 30 years. And I was thinking, man, this is like, these are South Park guys. This thing is going to get out of control. I don't know if what these theater people are going to expect when, how they're going to react. And true to the South Park guys, the content of the show, all all barriers of decency and so forth were pulled out. Uh, However, the intention of what the play was about remained intact, which is questioning, is there a difference between how we engage with religion spiritually versus the institutionalized version of that? Is there danger in relying on orthodoxy when it is rendered as a strict dogma versus something that is supposed to be much more open and inviting? All of those questions are embedded. But inside the art, there was language that I can't even, I would blush if I started telling you some of these songs that were being sung. And at intermission, I remember thinking, wow, I wonder how many people are actually going to leave, because of the song right before intermission had every dirty word you could imagine. I went into the lobby for my snack just to listen to what everybody was saying, and everybody was saying, well, this is wonderful. These are old ladies with cameos, and I mean, they're completely dressed up. This was a day at the theater. They loved it. And we went back in, there was nobody left. So everybody was there. But just to illustrate this point, if somebody who had not seen the show had, crept up to the stage door and put their ear against and heard what was some of the words that were being shouted about, they would start a letter writing campaign minimally to try to get the show shut down. And more that is happening, and that's a very dangerous thing. This is my saying that the arts community needs protection because just like the sciences, we need to know the parameters of what we are capable of, right? And what our imagination is, and what we're able to criticize, what we're able to celebrate without fear of being misinterpreted and then persecuted for that. So this brings us to this question of what is an artist? So if you consider how an artist does his or her work, typically it's in a private space. And even if you're not an artist, maybe you can understand what I'm about to say. When you're in a private space, it's very hard for you to bullshit to yourself. It's very hard for you to even recognize the legitimacy of obscene words. I mean, I'll challenge you just when all this is over, go into a private space and start saying all the dirty words you can think of out loud. You will not be able to offend yourself. It is impossible. So what does that mean? What does that mean that when an artist goes into these things, if you can't offend yourself with what the dominant culture says, this should be revered, this should be feared, this is a form of obscenity. All of those things, all of those rules only means something once you go outside of your private space, right? So, an analogy that I quite often give to people, I will approach as a form of a question. If you are sitting alone, all by yourself in a room, and you have an itchy ass, what do you do about it? The answer is you scratch your ass. There's not even a moment's pause. Immediately you scratch your ass, right? But when you're in public, it's a whole different ball game. In fact, I found a website that this is only a small portion of it, how to scratch your ass in public. And it grapples with that idea of just like, okay, some of these, one was running really fast, hoping that that will satisfy the itch, right? So if we just look at this even just as a metaphor, what an itchy ass is, it's an irritant, right? It's an irritant that you can fix immediately by taking care of, by scratching it, right? Now, consider these other irritants inside of society that deserve scratching that you have just been afraid your whole life to scratch. Whole societies have faced this problem when it comes to a non-corporeal itch, like a conceptual itch. So, are there other irritants that the dominant culture's sense of moral decency has prevented us from targeting for removal? The answer is absolutely yes. Racism is one of them, right? It was very difficult to go into the public space and say that black people in were not are not inferior to white people. And you can get in serious trouble in certain parts of the country. It was the wrong thing to do, but it took artists and it took activists and people like that to essentially say it's okay to scratch that itch and get rid of it in a public space because we all know privately that it is bullshit. Same thing with sexism. Women struggling to get the vote minimally, let alone just being, second class citizens. Anybody with a mother, aunt, sister, you know that they are not inferior to men. You know it, but you have to have this performative behavior in a public space that says, yes, they are. They do not deserve the vote, blah, blah, blah. And again, this list can go on and on. Classism, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, etc. All of these things, when they're allowed, when they're not allowed to be addressed in the public space by people who are going to be honest and forthright about the truism that they shouldn't exist and that it is an irritant that needs to be gotten rid of, uh, we're doomed until we can actually clear that up. Which also brings us to what the work that Ken so brilliantly talked about at the beginning of this thing, the military-industrial complex, right? We all understand the dangers of that. How do we approach that? How do we scratch that itch? We actually expand it. We make this parallel to other things, the retail industrial complex. That to me has the same level uh, as of violence as the military industrial complex. It's a different kind of violence. You can say it's a spiritual kind of violence. It's when you have the commodification of everything that is dehumanizing. It also justifies certain effronteries and mismanagement of the environment, all for the sake of profit. That is the retail industrial complex. And you can tie that into what the military industrial complex does also. Big business is literally justifying the end of the species, and that is a problem, which brings us to the capitalism industrial complex. You can expand all of this out. You can approach all of these problems either you can target the minutia, or you can look at the broader picture and figure out whoever you're talking to, what the best strategy is in turning people's lights on to the direness of this reality. Which brings us even to a deeper question: what is currency? Right? We have economics that we understand when it comes to currency and so forth, but what is the currency of a human being? Is our value, does it supersede other life forms? I mean, we've certainly used the excuse of codifying our differences as some sort of proof that we have that there is greatness and there is less than greatness. Uh, but we also do it with the planet, we do it with animals, we do it with everything. So what is currency? What is the economics of things? Which is what is value, right? Human life is should be the leading value. All life, actually. I mean, me even saying human life, I embarrass myself because it is actually even bigger than just human life. There is a way to consider and link everything together as a value that we should all be paying attention to. Manifested in all these different ways. There's a bunch of through ways that we can agree on. So why use art for this kind of conversation? All right, as you can see, the dragon I have with the conceptual language of blah, 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 learn the language, blah, 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 blah. And then you have the artist who is there to do stuff. And also, why use jokes? So I think the last bunch of slides I have are my art using jokes, just using art, all of the tools to try to get at issues from different angles. Now, I'm sure that everybody here probably likes jokes and probably uses jokes, uses humor. Why do we do that? What jokes do, and very similar to what art does, it's a kind of activism. Because just very simplistically, if I ask you, why did the chicken cross the road? You're not going to say, here, let me ponder this for a second. Let me do a little research and I'll get back to you. No, you're opening yourself up to a thrilling possibility, and you don't even want to guess what it is. You want to be surprised. Life is about figuring out how we can surprise each other and ourselves in a non-lethal way. That's why we get up in the morning. We want to be surprised. We want to learn new things. We want to have new experiences. So jokes are microcosms of that. They ask for a reconsideration because so much of what we think and feel about things, it's reflexive thinking. We've been taught how to behave. We've been taught how to engage with this value system that surrounds us in our particular society. Jokes throw that out the window and sort of make fun of it. And say that there is great wisdom in the absurdity and the unknown. So, for example, this is a Girl Scout cartoon that has done very well for me in the past. So it's the Girl Scout saying, I got this one for leather work, this one for canoeing, and this one for promising to dedicate my whole life to crushing the rich white patriarchy out of existence for making life so miserable for me and all my black and brown and queer sisters all around the world. So quite often with satire and with humor, what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out how to pronounce a blunt truth in a way that people aren't expecting it to be worded or rendered. Because this is just true. I'm not really inventing anything. So that attitude is connected with an injustice that needs addressing. So how do we do that? That's how we do that. Um, oops, now I can't read it. Hey Ken, can you read my? I'm blocked by something at the bottom. Can you read the full gag line?
Sure. Before we throw a ton of money into constructing a tomb for the unknown finger, we should first determine if it's saying fuck you or we're number one.
Right. Same thing. And this one, we can only sell it to you in good conscience as long as you promise only to use it for peace and never for war. And one of the things too that art and jokes do as a real plus when it comes to how we expand our knowledge and our universal appreciation of who we are and what we're doing with each other, um, is you want to make it viral. You want to make it worth repeating. So quite often, if you can render a joke or a drawing that you like, your first response is you want to show it to somebody else, right? So if we can make ideas and pieces of art that are rendered in service of appealing to our better angels, it's an asset. It really helps us. All right, Ken, I'm blocked again by the bottom here. So
Okay, it says, great news. We just found You just found out that Justice isn't really blind and that she's into rich white guys.
Right. All right. Yeah, I can't read this one either. Anything at the bottom I can't read.
Okay, I'll read it. Now remember, whatever you do, don't use any racial epithets. We don't want any trouble.
Now again, like this is a thing when it comes to how racism in this cartoon, but other prejudices and other really ugly thoughts, how they manifest and are normalized in society is something that we really have to pay attention to. You know, just like Amazon, I've done so many Amazon cartoons and Jeff Bezos and what that has done to smaller businesses and also destroying the need for people to go into the community. We're more and more becoming a virtual community, which is really detrimental to understanding who each of us is to one another. It's really, really dangerous. So this is a piece that I did that doesn't require any words because sometimes this is what you want to do. You want to create something that people are going to look at and be like, wow, that is pretty cool looking, and then look at the details and then the message of what this is trying to do. Hopefully will sink in longer because it's not about just reading the joke and moving on to the next thing. This is modeled after the Norman Rockwell illustration called Triple Self-Portrait. And as you can see, it is a racist America misreading itself as a virtuous Captain America. And unfortunately, this is something that resurfaces every few years. People keep discovering it and saying, wow, you've got your finger on the pulse. And it's unfortunately been used over and over and over and over again and continues to have significance, which is, it's a tragedy that this still has merit. And continuing on with the racial issue in this country, we have a police target, which again also rendered to have impact as just an image. It's a business cartoon. I second Thompson's motion to fuck everybody who isn't us. Again, crystallizing that thought. Now, this is a four-parter. You have murder, you have a massacre, you have a genocide, and then you have an investment opportunities. Now, following that line of thinking again is something, me just reflecting something that actually happens in the world. This is a business strategy. This is what justifies the Rust Belt, for example, that runs across the country. It justifies the complete dismantlement of poor communities. And yeah, I shouldn't even have to explain that to you. I'm sure you all get it. This is a differentiation between again, the institutional idea of church and then the radical Jesus version of the church. So as you can see, Jesus is protecting somebody from the queer community from the judgment and carnivorous nature of the institution of religion. This was me. This is called Eternal Damnation. It's a reworking of Picasso's Guernica to represent what's going on in America, the mayhem of what is happening with now the second Trump administration. Oh, and there he is. I was debating whether I was going to have a lot of Trump cartoons in here, but please don't have me look at Trump as much as I need to, since I have to draw him almost every single day. So this is called Chain Reaction. As you can see, the Lady Liberty is trying to gnaw herself, separate herself from Donald Trump. And then we get into the issue of Gaza. Actually, the first thing that pops into my head is needing to know if that's an Israeli baby or a Palestinian baby. So I know what, I don't know how to back it up. Oh, yay. So I know what the first thing that pops into my head is. And this is becoming, I did this early on in what's happening over in Palestine. So this was considered really, really outrageous when I did it, but it seems to be more and more appropriate to more and more people. This I did as an illustration to accompany a Chris Hedges article. So it's modeled after a vintage Italian travel poster, as you can see, and it's called Explore Gaza. This I did after Trump was talking about what he was going to do with Gaza, make it the new Riviera, and it's going to just be wonderful and sort of sexy for people eventually. So again, when it comes to some humor and some sort of dark commentary, what you want to do is you want to show the mythology as if you are ignorant to the facts on the ground and the misery and so forth. So that's what that one is. Now, this one I did uh, after Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the United Nations and made the equation about how many uh, Israelis were killed on October 7th and comparing it to the US population. And the math just happened to work out like this. So let me read this to you. I think I can guess what is under the bottom part, but I don't want to put Ken through this a paragraph of reading. So it's Benjamin Netanyahu working out the argument he hopes will shame and silence those critical of his relentless slaughter of Palestinians since October 7th by saying that the percentage of Israelis killed on that day by Hamas would be the equivalent of 20 September 11ths in America when measured proportionally against the US population, which he did. That's exactly what he did that day. But then I have him, while hoping nobody does similar math regarding the percentage of Palestinians he's killed since October 7th, because that would translate to be just over 6 million in the US. And there's something about that number some people might find unacceptable. So again, using art to demand a much more rigorous assessment of things has also been a long tradition. And all I'm doing is doing math on numbers that are real. I'm not inventing anything with a cartoon like this. So I'm using mathematics actually to make a point. This was one piece that I did with Trump, sending, now he was talking about sending U.S. citizens out of the country who might be troubled, to the democracy that he wants to create, which is really fascism. It's not really a democracy, I guess. So again, showing something like that. And then you can do something just similar. You can just show what the power imbalance looks like in real time. And I decided to make that pawn step forward to make it like Tiananmen Square. It's going to take that kind of bravery and against all odds to demonstrate what we have to do. There is a horrible mismatch. The rules are stacked against us, but we have got to make that move if we're going to save ourselves and not surrender to the complacency of authoritarianism, so forth. It's the do-it-yourself democracy kit, and the directions are give a shit. It's the most basic thing that we can do with that. This is, can I have a grant so I can finish my art? And so this cartoon is actually, I did this actually in 1991, I think, and it is far and away the most reproduced piece that I have ever done. I've gotten, to this day, I'll get, somebody will send me a picture from their phone. I was in a espresso bar, a cafe in Prague, and this was taped to the side of the machine. So I'm glad that that resonates with people still. And so, second to the last slide is, again, just the basic understanding of what an artist does. All right. So I did this for myself and just decided to share it with all you people. So the first is the artist trying to create a piece of art that acknowledges the beauty and vulnerability of the single human being. And then another one that celebrates the cohesion of the family. And then another one that rejoices in the strength of community. And then another one that thrills to the limitless possibilities of the nation. And then another one that seeks to embrace the massive camaraderie of globalization. And then another one that struggles to maintain a sense of individuality among the multiplicity. And then another one that complains about the cacophony of competing visions of truth and morality. And then another one that wonders why it's so hard for everybody to appreciate the beauty and vulnerability of the single human being. So it's a way to explore these complications and also always harking back to that moment when we need to recognize our mutual vulnerability, the fact that we are individuals who have a relationship with everybody else and the world all at the same time, but at the center is this beautiful singularity that we can't lose sight of. And understanding that this kind of work is this machine kills nobody. And that is my message, that I am not lethal. I'm a fun-loving chum.
Well, you're not lethal, but your humor is pretty deadly. I gotta tell you. Oh, shoot. I had to keep my audio off because I was laughing so hard out here. Uh,
Yeah.
but I gotta say too, Dwayne, I mean, you're talking about being funny, and the end of that was so right on and funny, but your stuff is also gut wrenching. I mean, you didn't show a lot of that during this, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so struck by how powerful your images are, and it's
Well, it's it's important. Because I mean, I think all of us have in our lives, we have these experiences where we do feel like laughing. We do feel like being inappropriate with our friends and so forth. And and that's a way to rejoice in life, right? But at the same time, we see great injustices and we see things that we really want to speak up about. And sometimes the thing that will inspire us into action in order to protect other people is to really see what that pain looks like, not sugarcoat it, not frame it in a way that makes it easy to ignore. It's as a commentator, it's my job to offend when I think it's in service of making sure that we're looking at things that are offensive and that need correction. Because if we enter in, particularly when it comes to political issues of political wrongdoing, and the subjugation of marginalized communities and so forth, and people who do not have the ability to protect themselves from the juggernaut of a hierarchy that will forever have their heads under their boot. um, Show the boot, show what's going on, show the crushing, and reveal the shrieking and the screaming, because it's true and it's real. And if my head is under a boot and I'm shrieking, I want people to hear it, and the people that I care about, I want to be able to hear when they're in pain and then render assistance and any way that I can, and then ask for people to help me render assistance to people who are suffering. It's really important.
yeah, yeah, really right on. We're going to do a few Q&As, and the way we do it here is, many of you know, you've been here before, is you use the reaction button to raise your hand. And then, I'll call on you. And as always, let me remind you to please, if you have a comment, that's fine, keep it short, don't go on. And a question would be great, so we can pitch it right back at Dwayne and have him speak to us similar. So please, short comments, and do have a question. And I see Wesley Brown right there. So Wesley, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then you can unmute and ask your question.
Yes. Can you hear me, Dwayne?
Yeah.
Great. Man, I'm just curious. Can you say something about your background, going back to when you were a kid, adolescent? How did you, first of all, I mean, your craft, how did you develop your fine art skills? Great, line drawing, all that stuff. How did you, what's your origin point? I'm thinking your first 20 years, let's just say. Can you say anything about that?
Yes, I certainly can. Yeah. So I grew up in a family that never saw any value in respecting somebody based on their title. I mean, even straight down to just like, mother, father, all of that. I came from a family that really loved to make jokes. Now, if you love to make jokes, what you have to do is you have to not take too seriously this, the power structures as if they are real, right? What you want to do is you want to recognize that everybody is equal, right? I mean, rich people are poor people with money, essentially. So if you understand that, then you have a great opportunity to make lots and lots and lots of jokes. And so that's what I was always doing with my family. And so you're always trying to outdo each other. So what you want to do is you want to go into the most inappropriate areas, and you know,
Yeah.
if you can, you want to turn people's stomachs up to the point where it's just like anything beyond that would be really, really wrong. So I grew up in that kind of a family. And similarly, I always just was or I always drew, just because for whatever reason, I just took to it because I never saw it as a feat of magic. I saw it just as a practicality. It was just fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the first 20 years of my life, I was just communicating as freely as my family let me. I was drawing relentlessly, as if you know my work, from very simple line drawings
Mm-hmm.
to meditating around other things. When I found out that I could draw like very realistic horses, it was a great asset in middle school and trying to get girls to like me. Uh, so that's what went on there. And then when I went to college, I went to a fine arts school, and because I'd arrived there with my craft already pretty well embedded, uh, I couldn't do anything that would. I was always getting A pluses just because of my craft,
Mm-hmm.
and I found it horribly distracting because I was so ravenous for knowledge. And if it is true, and I think it is, we only learn what we teach ourselves. I needed to free myself. So I went to college. I was there for a year and a half ish. And then I spent the next 3 or 4 years just living on people's floors. I was very close to New York. So I kept my student loan money and just bought, bootleg records and books and sleeping on people's floors and really living life. So if that's an explanation for something, that's what I have for you.
Yeah, that's really cool, Dwayne. Yeah, I get that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks for it. I see Donald Smith. So Donald, go ahead. I'm gonna see if I can ask you to unmute, and you unmute yourself.
Okay, Mr. Fish or Dwayne, whatever your name is, how do you earn a living? I notice you don't put copyright symbols on your images, and I wonder, a lot of people just copy them and put them on social media, on websites, and you don't earn money from that.
Right. So how I earned money, I was a teacher I was a professor at the University of Pennsylvania at Annenberg for 10, 11 years. Up until very recently, I got in a lot of trouble for my cartoons about Gaza. And it wasn't stuff that I was doing in the classroom. It was stuff that I was doing outside of the classroom. And all the Ivy Leagues have been attacked, as you've probably seen in the news, over the last couple years. And I was part of that cleansing process as being a dangerous individual. So I was making money as a professor for a long time, but I do get some money from some publications. It is true that I made more money when magazines and newspapers actually existed, and you don't get a lot of money publishing on online publications. So what I have had to do over the last couple of years, I started a Patreon page, Mr. Fish Cartoons or something. I don't even know what it's called, but you can find it through my website, clowncrack.com. So it's crowdsourcing. I get people that see value in what I do, and they give me as little as $1 a month. And I just started a Substack where I'm doing a lot more writing, and I'll probably be doing more journalism and fiction writing in that platform. And so I'm getting money from how the industry seems to work for artists now. You create an audience and hope they can give you a couple dollars a month, and then you do your best to stay alive, and stay active. Because one of the things too that has changed, unfortunately, is the middle class has been completely decimated in this country. So the arts community used to rely on the fact that it could have a part-time job and then spend a great deal of extra time working on their art and developing their craft. It's not so true anymore. So unfortunately, the arts community is suffering. There's fewer and fewer people that are able to do this because they do not see it as an occupation and they do not see it as a way to sustain themselves. I've just been doing it long enough that I have enough fans to make it barely function. But it functioned. I have a very supportive wife as well. So that's your answer. It's not a moneymaker, but you know, I'm not alive to make money, you know. It's that's always been a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, good. We I see two more hands raised, and so Moji, I'm going to call on you, and I know that you like to speak a lot, so I'm going to ask you to make your comment brief and ask a question. So I'm going to ask you to unmute and go ahead, Moji.
Hi, well, I wasn't, if you want me, I can talk a lot. But first of all, beautiful work, and thank you for centering morality in your art. That's wonderful.
Hmm.
And my art is poetry. I'm from Iran,
Hmm.
so I always feel like compared to Hafiz and Rumi, I joke and say I have a Hafiz envy, as in a penis envy.
Yes.
Every time I read Hafiz, I say, look what I've written. And so my question is, how do you, as an artist, view the role of the ego, especially when it rears its ugly head in the art?
Right.
I know it's a weird question.
No, I like the question. It's a good question because there's a
Thank
couple
you.
ways you can engage with the question about ego. You know, because like Thoreau, for example, said that, you know, I brag about myself. Who else should I brag about? You know, that's a kind of ego. Recognizing when you are successful at engaging with other people, engaging with the world, with whatever, you know, language you're utilizing for that, is it's okay. It's okay because I do it to other people. You know, I'm sure that if you're able to do it to other people and yourself, I think it's fine. One thing that I always try not to have inside of my identity is any affiliation to any group. To the point where the only reason I entered into editorial and political cartooning is because I hated the fact that so many of those artists, those cartoonists, all of their arguments were being um, perpetrated from either the right side of the aisle or the left side of the aisle. And I'm just like, there's not a humanitarian center in what you're saying. You're seeking virtue by saying that the other side are a bunch of idiots. And that's not even opinion, you know, it's just easy. It's like sports, you know, I'm not going to stand and just like want to strangle somebody because they don't like the Phillies or something like that. You know, it's ludicrous. But political thinking has turned into that, the gamesmanship stuff. So a way that I avoid thinking, you know, having the misconception that my ego is precious and require and needs protection is I surrender to the flow of the universe. I mean, I am a huge fan of Rumi. I'm a great fan also of Buddhism and Zen and Alan Watts. And I think that Eastern thinking, as far as I'm concerned, got it right a really long time ago, you know, and got it right before Western civilization did. You know, greeting the universe with a cosmic shrug and just looking for the poetry of the ride, and knowing that it's going to have everything in it: treachery, villainy, virtue, joy, all of those things. You know, one exists only because the other exists. You know, and we populate the moment that we're in, and we have to do our best to serve the greater good to the best of our ability. You know, that's the only hope that we have.
Thank you. Okay, so it looks like one more question. Kenzie Hernandez, I'm gonna ask you to unmute and go ahead.
Just want to thank you so much for your words and your art and your life. And wondering, and maybe you just spoke of it a little bit, but what would you say is your grounding? Like, what wells do you go to find that voice, find the inspiration? To be able to articulate your vision and more than your thoughts, I think your knowingness of what needs to be articulated.
I love that question. And there's an interesting, I mean, there's a way to answer it that is kind of curious to myself, in fact. I can't justify the fact that I wake up every day optimistic and excited to see what's going to happen. Even with all the stuff that's going on that's horrible in the world, I still wake up and I have hope and anticipation for positiveness to win out over negativeness. And again, that to me, saying it out loud often feels like there's something broken inside my mind, because how can you wake up every day and just given everything that's going on right now, just be like, all right, let's get to it.
Yeah.
There's almost a lunacy to that. But that said, the thing that keeps me going and always has is, as I said before, about my family growing up. And the family that I have now with my wife and my children and all the friendships around me. I find them, they're so precious to me. And I feel very lucky to be inside that kind of, collaborative experience of being. I define myself with many, we define ourselves by the company that we keep, in addition to how we engage with the world outside of the company that we keep. And even that said, I got into the habit years ago. I remember I was walking and I started to notice the trees that I was passing just as I was walking down a road. And a curious question occurred to me. I asked myself, what would happen? I feel like I've wasted so much of my life looking at things like trees, flowers, clouds, other animals, and asking the question, what is that? All of a sudden I said, let me do an experiment with myself. I'm going to ask, who is that? And boy, did that blow my mind. And I've sort of been in that space ever since, because if we can look around and not assume that we are isolated from these externalities that are, reality is a little dumb. Trees are a little dumb. They're things, yes, they grow, but they have no conscience, all that stuff. That's ludicrous when you really think about it. So if you start asking, who is that? You're surrounded by things that respond to pain, things that grow, things that die. You become empathetic in a more global way, and a richer way, and a deeper way, and a way that actually sustains you. I feel like I'm part of a system. I don't feel like I'm somebody who is engaging with a arithmetic that is functioning outside of myself, that I dip my toe into when I feel like it. It's always happening instantaneously, and it's going to keep happening. And so, just like I said to Moji, it's important for me to be aware of that and know I'm a participant and not a spectator when it comes to being alive.
Thank you.
Well, Dwayne, you actually, I think of some of the things I do as an activist in terms of pastoral work, caring for others and doing something that, benefits beyond myself. And I have a spiritual lens that I look through, and it strikes me that you do too. I saw your interview with Cornel West, and many of our people here may not know that you worked with Cornel on his presidential campaign,
Yeah.
and you were talking theology with Cornel. And maybe just to finish up, I mean, you just kind of did sort of a spiritual view of, asking nature all around you, who are you, etc. But there's something soulful about your work that do you see what you do as pastoral in a certain way? You think of yourself as kind of a pastor?
I would never say that. But then again, like, what is that? It is a really good question, because then you have to ask, what kind of work is that? Like, what is even if, okay, if we just even want to talk about the story of Jesus for a second, like the core teachings of Jesus, as far as I am concerned, have zero to do with the story of him being, I am the Son of God, I am coming back. I can, I have telepathy, I can fly, or all that stuff, meaningless. The reason he was persecuted and executed is because of the most basic idea, by saying that the meek are not pieces of shit. That is the threat to the hierarchy. Once you get that into a society where it's just like, oh, it's a hoax that the people in charge need to be in charge. That's when you have revolution, and that's when you have an equalizing opportunity to make life more meaningful and better for everybody involved. Right now, is that a religious point of view? I don't think so. I think once you start to do what happened to Christianity, from my point of view, is you turn it into like a monarchical sort of structure, where there are tiers of importance and all this sort of stuff. You absolutely don't need that. I think that and again, like in the King James version of the Bible, Jesus says, I am the Son of God. The is italicized. If you have it, go look it up. That's because it was changed. What he was purported to have said is, I am a Son of God. Now, that idea, again, that's a revolution. That's a radical notion. I am a. That means you can be a. You can be a. We can be a. And that, to me, is that's the core strength of religious thinking.
Yeah, beautiful. So the meek not being pieces of shit, that was one of the attitudes, wasn't it?
It was word for word.
Well, this has been great. Appreciate you so much. And now I have a whole nother point of view about scratching my ass in public.
Yep.
And you're inspirational to me.
That's the takeaway.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Fish. And thank you for all of our people who are here. And God bless you. So let's keep on, everybody. And thanks for all you do, Mr. Fish. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Onward, everybody.
Onward is right. So good night, everybody.